The blizzard howled through the night like an unchained beast, rattling windows and swallowing the streets in an endless curtain of white. To most, it was a night to stay locked indoors by the fireplace, safe with blankets and hot cocoa. But for Daniel Carter, a struggling single dad barely keeping his little world together, there was no choice but to be out in it. He had just finished a late shift at the lumber mill, his hands still aching from hours of heavy labor, his coat thin for such punishing weather, and his boots nearly worn through. Every step felt like a fight against nature itself. His breath came out in ragged clouds, stinging his face, and the wind shoved against him like invisible fists. He thought only of one thing: getting home to his little boy, Noah, a 4-year-old with bright hazel eyes who waited with a neighbor whenever Daniel worked these long shifts. Noah was his reason for enduring, his anchor in a life that had taken more than it had ever given. But on this night, fate had something waiting for him on the side of that desolate road, something that would change everything. At first, Daniel thought the shape ahead was just another drift of snow. The storm blurred outlines, making the world seem ghost-like and unreal. But as he trudged closer, something inside him, perhaps instinct, perhaps destiny, pulled him toward it. A flicker of movement caught his eye. His heart lurched. It wasn't snow. It was a figure. A woman hunched on the frozen ground, her back against a telephone pole, clutching something so tightly in her arms he could barely make it out. Daniel's steps quickened, fear pounding in his chest. "Hey!" he shouted through the wind, though his voice was nearly carried away. No answer came, just the sound of the storm screaming. When he finally reached her, his stomach dropped. She was young, barely in her 20s, her face pale and lips trembling blue from the cold. Her hair was matted with snow, and her eyes fluttered open for the briefest moment, glazed with exhaustion and pain. In her arms were not one, but 2 tiny bundles wrapped in threadbare blankets and newborn twins. For a second, Daniel could only stare, his mind reeling. Who was she? Why was she here, in this storm, with babies that looked scarcely a few days old? He crouched low, shaking her shoulder gently. "Ma'am, hey, stay with me. Can you hear me?" Her lips parted, and a broken whisper escaped. Words carried on the edge of consciousness. "Please see broken bar, help, aim a broken bar." She tried to tighten her hold on the babies, but her strength failed, and her arms slackened. Daniel's instincts surged. He scooped one of the infants carefully into his own coat, shielding it from the freezing air, then slid his other arm beneath her back to lift her. She was light, far too light for someone who had just given birth, and the weight of desperation pressed down on him harder than the snow ever could. He didn't know who she was, where she came from, or how she had ended up abandoned in the storm. All he knew was that she and those tiny lives needed saving. The wind clawed at his face as he struggled back toward his truck, parked a few blocks away. Each step felt endless, his boots sinking into snow, his arms burdened with more than his strength should have allowed. The woman's head lolled against his chest, her breathing faint and irregular. The twins stirred, one letting out a weak cry that pierced the night. That sound lit a fire in Daniel's chest. He wasn't just carrying strangers, he was carrying fragile souls who might not make it if he slowed down. And though his own life had been marked with disappointment and heartbreak at the loss of Noah's mother, the crushing weight of bills, the loneliness of fatherhood, Daniel refused to let fate steal another chance for someone else. He pressed forward, muttering words of encouragement to the woman and the babies, though he wasn't sure if they could hear him. When he finally reached his truck, his hands were numb and his body trembling. He gently laid the woman across the seat, tucking the twins against her chest and pulling every spare blanket he had from the back. His truck groaned to life after several agonizing attempts, the engine coughing against the cold. He blasted the heat, praying it would be enough to bring some warmth back into their fragile bodies. As he drove through the near whiteout toward town, his mind spun with questions. Who was she? Why had no one come looking for her? What would happen to the babies if she didn't survive the night? He glanced over at her pale face, illuminated by the dashboard glow, and felt something stir inside him, an ache of compassion so deep it nearly hurt. He knew struggle, he knew abandonment, he knew what it was to feel left behind. But no one deserved this. By the time he reached the small clinic on the edge of town, Daniel was running on sheer adrenaline. He rushed inside, shouting for help. Nurses and the town's only doctor hurried to take the woman and her twins, disappearing into a flurry of activity. Daniel stood in the waiting room, shaking violently as the adrenaline drained from his system. His mind screamed for him to go check on Noah, but his feet wouldn't move. He couldn't just leave. Something about the sight of her out there in the storm, something about those twins, had wrapped around his soul and refused to let go. Hours passed in a blur until finally the doctor emerged, removing his gloves with a weary sigh. "They're stable, for now," he said. Relief washed over Daniel, so strong his knees nearly buckled. But the story didn't end there. Over the next few days, Daniel found himself returning to the clinic, bringing little supplies when he could, have warm clothes for the babies, soup for the young mother who, when she finally woke, barely had the strength to whisper her name. "Emily," she said softly, her voice raspy but determined. Her eyes, though tired, held the depth of sorrow Daniel recognized. She explained in fragments, too weak to tell the full tale, that she had nowhere to go, no family who wanted her, no home to bring her twins to. Every word twisted Daniel's heart, because he knew what it was like to be cast aside. Emily's gratitude for his help was quiet but profound. She watched him with a mixture of awe and confusion when he came by, often with Noah in tow. Noah, in his innocent way, was fascinated by the twins, always asking if he could help feed them or make them smile. Seeing the three children together tugged at something in Daniel's chest he hadn't felt in years. A hope. Yet, he also feared it. He was barely managing to raise Noah alone. How could he possibly be a part of Emily's burden? And yet, every time he thought about walking away, he saw that night in the blizzard, her broken body shielding her newborns with the last of her strength. He couldn't shake the image. He couldn't shake her. As days turned into weeks, a bond quietly began to form. Emily confided in him little by little, her struggles, her mistakes, the betrayal that left her abandoned in the storm. And Daniel, against his better judgment, began to confide in her as well. They were two broken people, thrown together by chance, yet there was a strange comfort in their shared vulnerability. He started noticing the way her eyes softened when she looked at him, the way his chest warmed when she smiled despite her pain. And though he tried to bury it, a quiet thought took root inside him. Maybe fate had not been so cruel after all. But just as hope began to flicker, reality returned with its cold hand. Bills piled up, the mill threatened layoffs, and rumors spread in town about Emily's past, the rumors that painted her as reckless, irresponsible, unfit. Daniel bristled at them, knowing firsthand how easily people judged without understanding. Still, doubt gnawed at him. Was he risking too much by letting her into his life, and into Noah's? Or was this the very miracle they both needed? One snowy evening, as Daniel stood by Emily's bedside and watched her cradle her twins, she looked up at him with eyes full of unspoken fear and whispered, "What if I can't do this alone?" The words hung in the air, heavy and raw. Daniel's throat tightened, his heart pounding with the decision he knew he couldn't avoid much longer. And that, dear friends, is where we pause. Because life has a way of testing the broken before granting them miracles. And Daniel's journey with Emily and those fragile twins was only just beginning. If you've felt the pull of this story, if you believe in love rising from the harshest storms, in family born not just of blood but of the weeks after the blizzard settled into a fragile rhythm, though Daniel often wondered if it was rhythm or simply survival, Emily, still weak from her ordeal, stayed in the small guest room at the back of the clinic with her twins, while Daniel visited as often as his job and Noah would allow. Each visit chipped away at the distance between them, as if the storm that nearly ended them had also bound their fates together. But beneath the surface of growing closeness lay fear, and fear has a way of whispering doubts even when hearts are beginning to trust. Daniel knew struggle better than most. Every day he woke before dawn, packed Noah's small backpack for daycare, and headed to the mill with tired eyes and sore muscles. His co-workers respected him for his grit but often reminded him, sometimes joking, sometimes cruelly, that he was doing double duty as mom and dad. He carried that weight quietly, never letting Noah see how heavy it was. Yet when he returned from work and stepped into the clinic, hearing the soft cries of the twins or catching sight of Emily rocking them with a tender determination, something shifted inside him. He felt less alone, for the first time since his wife had walked out, leaving him with a toddler and shattered trust. Daniel felt that maybe life wasn't finished with him after all. Emily, for her part, was learning to breathe again. Her nights were still haunted by memories she rarely spoke of: the man who abandoned her, the family who turned their backs, the coldness of a world that decided she was disposable. But when she saw Daniel walk through the door with Noah skipping at his side, she began to believe in something she thought she had lost forever: safety. She noticed the way Daniel bent low to help Noah with his shoelaces, the way he always checked the baby's blankets before saying a word to anyone, the way his tired smile never faltered when the children looked at him. He was flawed, weathered, scarred, but he was real. And to Emily, real was more beautiful than perfect. Still, reality was not kind. The clinic was overcrowded, and whispers began circulating that Emily couldn't stay there much longer. Supplies were running low, donations weren't enough, and the doctor gently told her that soon she'd have to find a place of her own. Daniel overheard the conversation one evening when he dropped off some groceries, and it tightened something in his chest. He didn't sleep that night. He turned over every possibility in his mind. Could he take them in? His house was small, barely big enough for him and Noah. His paycheck stretched thin as it was. But the thought of Emily and the twins alone, cast out into the cold again, made his blood run colder than any winter storm. The next morning, Daniel made a decision that scared him more than anything he'd ever done. He cleared out Noah's old crib from the garage, dusted it off, and set it up in the corner of his modest living room. Then he went to Emily, words tumbling out before he could second-guess himself. "You don't have to go anywhere. You and the baby as a broken bar. You can stay with me, with us, until you're back on your feet." Emily stared at him, her eyes wide and trembling. "Daniel, I can't. You already do so much for your son. I don't want to be a burden." His voice broke as he answered, "You're not a burden, Emily. You never were. You were out there in that storm, fighting to keep those babies alive with nothing but your own body. That's not weakness, that's strength. And a broken bar. I can't just watch you walk away into nothing." Her lips quivered, tears spilling before she could stop them, and for the first time in years, she let someone else's strength hold her up. Moving in together was anything but easy. Daniel's tiny house became crowded with crying twins, bottles, diapers, and sleepless nights. Noah struggled at first, jealous of the attention the babies received, sometimes acting out or clinging desperately to his father. Daniel's exhaustion deepened, but so did his resolve. Emily did everything she could to help, cooking meals when she had the strength, rocking the babies through the night, even reading to Noah with a gentleness that slowly melted his resistance. One evening, Daniel stood in the doorway, watching Emily sitting cross-legged on the floor as Noah leaned against her, laughing at the funny voices she made while reading. His chest ached at the sight, not from pain but from a longing so fierce he almost couldn't breathe. He didn't just see a young mother trying to survive anymore. He saw the outline of something he never thought he'd have again: a family. But the world rarely lets fragile hope grow without testing it. Rumors began spreading through town faster than the snow melted in spring. Some said Emily was reckless, that her babies weren't safe with her, that Daniel was foolish for taking in a woman he barely knew. The weight of judgment pressed hard, especially when a representative from Child Services appeared at Daniel's door, asking pointed questions about Emily's compassion. Then,